We're live. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name's John. Below me here is
Andy.
Andy, and on the bottom is.
Evening, guys. It's Robbie again. How are we?
How is everybody? Okay, so what we're doing right here is it is T-minus 52 minutes to the launch of the demo mission 2 to the International Space Station. So we're just here as part of the USS Cuchulain to chat about all things space in kind of excited anticipation of what's happening over in the States at the moment. So this is a recap for just in case anybody who's watching wasn't watching on Wednesday. Wednesday's mission was scrubbed due to weather because the weather expectation for prime, what would it be? Prime conditions went from 60% to 50% down to 40%, and they decided a T-minus 16 minutes and 33 seconds to launch to scrub the mission and do it today. So today we have a weather consideration of 50-50. So we're not doing too much better than we did on Wednesday.
No, but we are due for a weather update in about 5 minutes. At T-minus 45 minutes, we're due for a weather update, which should give us a bit more information.
Yeah.
For anyone who's not aware, it's not just the weather around Cape Canaveral that they're considering. It's also the weather over North and South Carolina, where the escape landing zone may be, as well as the weather over the prime recovery zone if they're out over the ocean. They're considering. So right now, there's a weather system out over the Atlantic, which is potentially hazardous if the astronauts need to engage the emergency escape system, which would fire the 8 rockets on the module itself and separate it from the rocket itself. So that's also one of the considerations. So the weather does look gorgeous there on Cape Canaveral, ready for launch.
That's good. There's some cumulus clouds building as well around the area, which I'm quite worried about. So, of course, it's not just clouds in the lower atmosphere, it's the conditions in the wind shear and the upper atmosphere as well that they have to consider. There's quite a lot to look at when you're looking at a launch. But I don't know. I'm hopeful. Hello to Q Forward and Grace and the guys in Q Forward. Hello, Facebook user, who I need to go to a different device to see who you are. That's StreamYard permissions. So while I lean over here and touch my other console, and I go to a different thing, unless somebody else has that up on the screen, who knows who that is? So
that is Nikki Ward.
Who is it? Nikki Ward. So it's Nikki. Hi, Nikki. Thanks for joining us.
Guys, I was just going to say, if you're not giving StreamYard the permissions, all we'd ask, just if you are putting a comment in on the live stream, just put your name either at the beginning or the end of the comments, just so we know who it is and we're not having to try and locate who you are, because that can be a bit awkward.
So hello to John Hardy, man himself, Richard Sams, and Frank. Thanks for joining us all, guys. I know a lot of people are in Q Forwards watching. We're all watching multiple streams, I presume. I've got the stream here over my shoulder on my big TV, but I'm also streaming the same image through the laptop, so it's coming through on the system. I know that the little overlay that I've made down on the bottom of the page is kind of covering up the timer, but you can still see T-minus 47 minutes and 13 seconds to launch. So I was watching the guys earlier on. Is that Doug with his eyes closed? Or
that's Doug chilling out.
Yeah.
Mission Commander Doug chilling out with his eyes closed.
He's going into Zen mode.
So he is well and truly used to high pressure situations.
We were kind of. My mother was saying that he always seems to be quite fidgety, and possibly that's to do with the fact that he is actually a test pilot and has been flying F-18. He was like the first person to fly an F-18 Super Hornet. So I'd say he's used to missions, but as a person who's used to being in a single cockpit fighter, sitting in a rocket where you don't have any controls must be somewhat frustrating for someone who's used to being able to just take the throttle and stick and go.
Yeah, I'd say he's itching to get his hands on the controls.
Definitely.
Bob is the one who's going to be controlling. Bob's the pilot, and it's just the commander. So it'll be interesting if they do get up to do. It'll be interesting to see what exactly they have in regards to who gets to control what, and will it be a thing where he's literally sitting there with his knee board, talking to Doug to his right, like a navigator would be in a rally car, where literally turn right, 200 yards, turn left, brief turn. They have numbers for the turns or something. So
coming up 6 left, coming up 3 right.
So is that what Doug will be doing when he's there? So
I think, to be honest, and I know this sounds like every Star Trek fan's dream, but if this was me, I would love to have that Zephyr Cochrane rock song right now.
So Magic Carpet Ride, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe the guys who are watching with us out there, have Magic Carpet Ride queued up just so we can have that Zephyr Cochrane moment. Because a lot of people have been posting there's the arm retracting.
Oh.
So that's the arm retracting away from the capsule.
So we're at T-minus 44 minutes now, so the update should be coming in. The weather update should be coming in any minute.
Obviously, because we're talking over the feed here, we're not listening to the actual commentary. So I'm sure other people have that going as well. So you guys might actually hear something before we'll actually see it. But that's it. That's an exciting view to have up there. 268 feet above the ground to see that. Look at that. That's a beautiful shot there as she comes away from the rocket.
So just to make you guys all aware, the launch escape system has now been armed. So Doug has a button under his left arm right now that he can press, which will activate the 6 or the 8 jets on the Dragon module itself. If there is an urgent or emergency requirement of separation of the Dragon capsule, it will eject off the top of the rocket itself up to about 2 miles, deploy parachutes, and drift back into the ocean.
Right, so that means literally the capsule on the top of the rocket will launch itself from the rocket to escape it. So that's their ejection. That's their safety for the minute, or for these moments leading up, because the rocket is now fueled. That was what took the time when they scrubbed on Wednesday. That was what the time took. That's why they were sitting in there for so long, was because they had so much. They had the fuel to take out of the rocket before they could get to the boys again. So I was reading today. There was or you would have heard that Starship, which is the SpaceX other multi-crew spaceship that they're creating. Starship had a test explosion there during the week, and I was just looking into that today, and it was the test had actually finished. And what happened with the explosion was they were defueling the main tank of Starship's main tank test, and there was a problem where the methane fuel system most probably started to let fuel out methane fuel that mixed with the oxygen nearby, and all it took was a small minor spark, and it just went boom. So that was that.
T-minus 42 minutes is launch, close visors and arm launch escape system.
Now they've got about, 6 buttons in the arms of the chair, as well as the controls on the touchscreen. So I wonder what the controls on the arm of the chair are for.
Well, the controls on Doug's chair on his left arm are
Yeah.
the launch escape system. He is the only one as mission commander who can actually arm and engage that.
Yeah, you can see he's rubbing it there with his fingers. He's just he's running his finger. I wonder. I presume it to be on a different thing from push to talk.
And we are currently go for launch at T-minus 41 minutes.
Hi to the captain, Alan O'Shea. Lee is watching, and Jerry Lynch. How you doing, guys? Thanks for joining us to kind of watch us on the countdown to T-minus 41 minutes to launch. This is not anything particularly strange for the Dragon missions. The Dragon they've done 20 cargo missions so far with the Dragon Capsule as a cargo runner, but they this is the reason why this is so exciting is this is the first manned mission in this ship. So the ship is completely automated, which is probably why Doug is sitting there going on. See now, I mean, if you watch his feet when he's waiting, he's sitting there and his foot's doing this, like anybody would do, when you sit cross-legged, your foot's kind of,
No, well, this is where things get fun now because they're not allowed open close visors until they're again either in orbit or until they scrub the mission. So those visors closed is a big step so far.
So this is all leading up towards the Orion missions, which the first Orion test launch for the capsule is going to be in late 2021. So, it's less than a year and a half away for the beginning of the Orion missions, which leads into the Orion capsule launch, leads into the Artemis lunar missions, where the first woman to land on the moon will begin for that. And then Artemis leads into the Mars missions for sending the Orion capsule all the way to Mars. So these are the steps that are being taken in regards to the continuation of the space program. So this is the kind of the exciting thing. This is when we were growing up as kids. Because the three of us are around the same age. We were seeing the space shuttles, which were really exciting back in the 80s, first launch of Columbia in 1981, and up until their discontinuance in 2011, which was highly disappointing. But this is the ramping back up of the space program. And another thing that is quite exciting for this is in the space program. While there's quite a number of negativities coming out of, unfortunately, coming out of the United States at the moment, even today, the positivities of the current administration is the refunding, bipartisan refunding of the space program in the United States. So I believe next year's budget has been is coming in for $25 billion to be invested in the space program next year.
But they're also talking about the idea where, so at the moment, one of the big things about the current launch setup is that, as we kind of touched on during the last live broadcast, these seats are paid for. So they've had to buy these seats off SpaceX in order to launch. Yeah. There is talk of NASA potentially, provided the demo mission and the Dragon missions go well, potentially buying a fleet of ships from SpaceX that they can launch themselves in and have the NASA independent funding as well as co-contracted commercial missions.
Yeah, and as we said before on the previous ones, the Dragon is not the only one. Dragon is, or SpaceX is not the only company working on this. Boeing are also working on the Starliner, but they had a huge setback there in December, where their capsule on its demo mission got into space, but due to computers and clock problems, it expended its ISS docking fuel 11 hours early. But it did make it back home, so that capsule did make it back home. But because it's a computer problem they have, millions upon millions of lines of code that have to be gone through, and that's going to take them about a year, if not longer, to go through. So there's SpaceX, Boeing, and then of course Lockheed Martin are the ones making the Orion capsule. So it's all very exciting. I don't know about you two, but what do you think? I miss Space Shuttle. I just miss what she was, the shape of her, that she was a craft that flew. How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah. Sorry, Rob, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's funny you should miss it because Doug was the last mission commander of STS-171.
Yeah.
He was the last mission commander of the last shuttle mission of Endeavour going up into orbit. So I suppose in a way it's a heritage return to the shuttle missions.
Yeah.
A continuation of the heritage of the shuttle missions. But yeah, the shuttle was something unique, and I think it will be missed.
What were you going to say there, Andy?
Well, I mean, just saying about like the shuttle. I mean, the shape of it, like it was so like unique. It represented, space exploration.
Yeah.
In general, as before did obviously the Apollo and the Saturn V rockets. I mean, that they're still iconic. You see them in a lot of different places,
including over my shoulder here.
Including over Jono's shoulder.
Yeah, the Saturn V booster is just one of those that will always just be the most iconic. And it's the same with the Aquarius lander. Can't remember what Boeing classed the lander as, but the lunar lander is always one of those shapes that no matter what SpaceX or Boeing or NASA do with their lander, the Artemis lander, the moon lander is always going to be that iconic thing of space exploration.
I have so over my shoulder. That's my 3 foot tall Lego Saturn V rocket, and there's the Lego version of the lunar lander that you were just talking about.
That's cool.
So yeah, so that's my little kind of things. I must pick up that Lego ISS. Big fan of the Lego.
Funny, they're talking about models, and she has one of the presenters has a little model, of course, the Dragon Capsule there.
And just at T-minus 35 minutes, propellant loading has started.
Oh, it started. I thought they'd loaded it already. So they're only starting up now.
So they've loaded the propellant. The propellant loading goes in 2 stages. The propellant loading goes into the Dragon Capsule first for the launch escape system, and then propellant loading for the main booster for the Falcon 9.
Right, okay. We've got some comments here. We've got Anthony Raythorn is making tribbles, making tribble uniforms.
Oh, wow.
Anthony, you're one of the hardest working men in Starfleet.
Yeah. Shout out to Anthony.
And Frank says, the shot across the lake is so iconic. I remember watching Columbia's launch, and the view from across the lake was iconic even then. It's funny you should say that. I was watching just before I was talking to Frank earlier on about some other stuff that Frank has coming up, which is very exciting. But I did pull out some of the DVDs that I got when I was over in Smithsonian with Discovery. So this is one of the sets that I have. I was watching today in the first flight of Columbia in 1981.
Wow.
I was only 1 in 81, so obviously I don't remember that happening. But the interesting thing that with Columbia's launch in 1981 was they didn't have a test mission, or you know what I mean. They didn't have, like, this has had a demo mission. This module has had 20 cargo runs before this manned spaceflight. So this is a very tried and tested capsule. It's proven itself. This is just the first time it's had people on board. Whereas Columbia, they'd had Enterprise and done all the aero testing with Enterprise, but Columbia had had to go up with no manned testing beyond the atmosphere. So that would have been a very scary moment back then.
Yeah.
So I think tonight the guys are going to have an easier ride of it.
Oh, definitely. I mean that everything is tested to it within everything they can possibly test them to. These days.
Oh, of course.
Well, I suppose the other thing to remember is nowadays everything's done in a computer long before it's even
That's it.
goes near a CNC machine to cut the first part. I can guarantee you, Dragon has been flying in computer simulations for the better part of a decade before we even heard about it. We just got word from Mission Control there. Stage 2 fueling has begun.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the Saturn V, Falcon 9 is a multi-stage rocket. So, what you'll see is Stage 1, the main booster, that's the reusable section of the rocket, will ignite from the platform there. It will separate when it gets to about 5 miles into the sky. Stage 2 will kick in then, and then you have the command module or booster or the Dragon module engine, which will take it the rest of the way to rendezvous with the ISS. So they've only started fueling Stage 2, which is a bit odd to me that they're working down the stages rather than up.
Well, because of what you've said about how the escape system works for Dragon, where they have an escape system that can launch the module off the top of the rocket in case of a problem, and then it can come back down to Earth. It would make sense that the capsule will be fueled first, and then the second stage, and then the third stage, going that way. Betty O'Brien is joining us. Thanks for joining us, Betty. Betty says she remembers the Apollo 11 launch back in 1969.
Wow.
I am envious of you, Betty.
Yeah.
For some of us, that's there's a tinge of jealousy for those of you who were around back then.
It definitely is.
Liquid oxygen fueling has started on Stage 1, so we've moved on to the liquid oxygen fueling. So again, for anyone who's not aware, Dragon is still using a very similar propellant system, or Falcon 9, I should say, because they've been very clear to differentiate between Dragon and Falcon during the whole commentary that's been ongoing since about 5 o'clock our time. Falcon 9 is still using a very similar propellant system to original launch systems on the Saturn V, which is a bi-fuel system where essentially liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen are injected into the cone of the engine itself, ignited in the cone, very much like diesel or petrol in the cylinder of your car, and it's only when it's hit there that it's ignited and it's thrust downwards then. So they're still using that bi-fuel system, which I find fascinating that 40, 50 years on, it's still the same kind of technology.
Well, it's one of the things that has been that SpaceX have had to do is they've had to look at it from the ground up. They've had to build themselves from scratch. Almost like when the Americans had von Braun creating the rockets after World War II. SpaceX are quickly trying to play catch up because obviously they can't have access to any of those redacted government documents. So they really, really are building their rocket system from scratch, as it were. And that's why all of their builds and stuff are coming through like Starship. They've had so many Starship explosions for the spaceship Starship because they're literally testing how their welds go and all that type of stuff. Just where we're 5 minutes to 8 here, and we're T-minus 27 minutes to launch. I've invited a special guest this evening, just as well as myself and Andy. We've got Mihal Quigley from the States, Lieutenant Commander Michael Quigley, United States Navy retired, who has a bit of a history. Welcome to the stream, Michael.
Thanks very much, Jono and Robbie and Andy. It's nice to see you all.
Evening, Michael. How are you getting on?
Thanks for jumping on the stream with us. Appreciate it. Like
you're my very 70s look today. I shaved off.
You gone back to the beginning of the show.
Right. Yeah, the mutton chops. They won't last long, but for the moment,
You're expecting to help in the rescue and recovery if anything goes wrong for Enterprise's landing. That's what the era you're going for.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about yourself, Michael. You were a lieutenant commander in U.S. Navy. And
U.S. Navy, yeah. I just retired after 30 years. I was 14 years enlisted in the Army, which is a little unusual to go Army to Navy, but I was 14 years enlisted in the Army, and then 16 years commissioned in the Navy. I had some heart surgery almost a year ago, July 2nd of last year. And of course, it put me through a medical board, so I had to medically retire. But I think 30 years is a good run. So,
wow, 30 years that's an amazing career. And you retired lieutenant commander from the Navy?
Yes, lieutenant commander. I was an intelligence officer, space operations, and counterterrorism.
Wow, I mean that's some heavy duty stuff there. So obviously, because we're watching the two boys here on a space mission. What was it like when you were working with I suppose Air Force Space Command that will now become Space Force? But what was that like?
So I've been around space my whole life. My father was a contractor working on the Apollo program and for a time also Skylab program.
Wow.
He worked for IBM, so he wasn't a NASA employee, but he worked for IBM. And like I said, he was on the Apollo program. So I grew up, I knew a lot of astronauts and engineers and so forth. I do not possess the mathematical skills to have been one myself. I'm more of a history and literature type, but languages, I'm pretty good with languages. But unfortunately, my dreams for being an astronaut were dashed. But I was able to get qualified as a space operations officer, and it's not as sexy as you might sound. Astronauts are also considered space operations. They would have a similar designator code that I do. They're all part of the space cadre that we have in the Navy. But I dealt mostly with satellites, primarily for intelligence gathering purposes. Some on the acquisition side as well. I worked space policy for the Defense Department, Joint Chiefs of Staff. So it's not quite as sexy, and Washington, D.C. is not, at the launch pad and in mission control. So it's a different sort of environment. But, it all, I remember there's a story, I believe it was true. I think it was President Johnson, it may have been Kennedy, but I think it was Johnson, was visiting, I think it was Houston, the Johnson Space Center, and he met a janitor who was sweeping the floor back in the 60s. And he asked the janitor what he does here, what's your role here? And the janitor says, I'm helping to put a man on the moon. And the president was so, taken by that, by saying, this man sweeps the floors so that they're clean and sanitary, so that scientists and engineers can put an astronaut into space. So he considers himself part of the same team. And so with that sort of mentality, no matter what you're doing, where you are a cog in the wheel that helps for these programs. So even in Washington, D.C., sitting in the depths of the Pentagon, I still felt like I was part of something very special. Unfortunately, I'm not part of Space Force, although I did watch the 3 episodes of the new Space Force comedy last night. So,
I haven't actually sat down to watch that. Is that available on Netflix on our side of the pond, guys?
It is, John.
Yeah.
I just started yesterday, I think, first day.
Yeah, I watched the whole thing last night. I binge watched the whole first season.
Oh, really?
I just did 3 episodes.
So I enjoyed it.
So Michael, it doesn't matter if you're working in the Pentagon or working on satellites. I mean, being part of that mission control, that's still pretty exciting. What is the difference, if you don't mind me asking? Because obviously we're all, we're Irish. We're kids that grew up in Ireland, and those things are very American. But who did? We now we're joking about it, Space Force. The Air Force controlled Space Command. So how did the Navy work into that? Like, you're in naval intelligence,
right?
How did that work?
Space is a strange entity, particularly where the military is concerned. We've signed treaties not to weaponize space, and so there is the whole Space Force idea is really sort of an open-ended question of whether or not it's actually legal.
Right.
but that's another conversation. But the military has been involved, obviously, with space since the beginning. And so it's been, all services, the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy have all had space programs, and they've had space commands, which is not a full, a space command is not a full service like the Air Force is, but it would be a component of that. So the Navy had a space command, and now we have a space command still. Then how the services space forces will work with the U.S. Space Force is yet to be determined. Obviously, as they stand up Space Force, it will take primacy in the domain of space. Air Force would have the domain of air, and the Navy would have the domain of the sea. And of course, the Army would have the domain of the ground. But there is a lot of crossover. The Navy alone, we have ground forces, surface forces, subsurface forces, and air forces, and space forces. So it's sort of a moving target. We're trying to figure this out and build this plane as it's flying because this whole Space Force thing was not planned. It was an idea, good or bad. It was an idea put forth by the president, and by the power of his office, he made the Pentagon step in line, and he made Congress fund it. And so here we are. We have the beginnings of a new military branch, but it's very, very ill-defined at this point. So the services are still taking the lead. For the last decade or so, the Air Force has laid claim. They actually tried to change their name at one point to Air and Space Force, but they have sort of laid claim to the beyond the atmosphere. And not everybody feels that they have the right to do that. Those of us in the Navy, for example. But it seems to be sorting itself out with the, under the guise of a new military branch, which would be similar to what the Marine Corps is to the Department of the Navy. So would the Space Force be to the Department of the Air Force. It would be a separate but a component, a separate service, but a component of the larger Air Force department. Like Space Command of the Air Force is already. Yes, except for the fact that it would have its own 4-star leadership. It would have its own funding lines and budgets from Congress, like the Marine Corps does. But it wouldn't have a secretary of space, right? It wouldn't have the secretary of the Air Force would cover, like the secretary of the Navy covers both the Navy and the Marine Corps. Right.
Okay. So, and just how do you see, as a retired naval intelligence officer, how would you see NASA and Space Force working together? Will NASA stay as it is?
Yeah. NASA is a civilian agency, and obviously it has always had a close relationship with the military. The first astronauts and the majority of all astronauts, even now, are either active duty or former military. In part, that's because the military has programs that allows you to sort of be competitive if you want to be an astronaut. It gives you an opportunity to fly fighter jets and lots of air, lots of airtime, stick time, flight hours. So there's a lot of reasons why the military, is predominant in NASA's astronaut corps. But NASA itself is a civilian agency, and it will continue to be so. It is primarily directed to experiment with aviation and space, aerospace technology, safety. And it would work very closely with the Space Force to develop, satellites and vehicles and mission sets.
Well, that's fantastic. It's it's great for guys. You jump in if you guys have any questions as well.
I was just going to say, good news from the pad so far. T-minus 17 minutes. The weather has improved to odds of 75-25.
Well, that's a big improvement
all
on
areas of launch zones.
So,
for anyone who's curious about what that
now is when they were scrubbed on Wednesday, so we're coming up 10 seconds to being in a better position than what was going on Wednesday.
Yeah. Did you hear what happened with SpaceX Starship?
Yeah, we were talking
Yeah,
about
we
that
were
we came
discussing
on.
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Starship, and that's part of the thing where the military, obviously, in the development of NASA and all the rockets, a lot of that information, as you would know, is kept. A lot of it's redacted. SpaceX wouldn't have access to all of it, so SpaceX is really learning everything that the American forces, the Russian forces, all learned in the 40s and the 50s. They're trying to do it in the early 21st century, but they're trying to push through it with the resources of SpaceX, Elon Musk's multiple companies and all that, the Boring Company and Tesla, just to try and accelerate their position. And just in in a couple of short decades, you have things like Dragon Capsule doing multiple runs. So standing as much as they can on the shoulders of giants, but also having to figure out an awful lot of things on their own.
For anyone who was curious, by the way, as to what that giant white cloud coming off the Falcon 9 was, so at the moment, because they are going to have to do 19 hours from launch pad to ISS, they're actually going above the nominal fuel load that was calculated for Wednesday's launch. So they've had to do a second fill of liquid oxygen. And that white cloud that you saw was actually the cryogenic cooling system for the liquid oxygen lines, to make sure that they were cold enough to take the liquid oxygen going in. So at the moment, as Jim Lovell said in the famous kind of, get ready for the scariest 12 minutes of your life, like they're only going to be burning for 12 minutes from pad to low Earth orbit. Each stage only burns for about 6 or so minutes, and they coast for about 3 of those. So it'll be interesting to see. They're going to have a number of tasks to accomplish in the 19 minutes or the 19 hours from burn completion to the ISS rendezvous. As kind of Doug put it in one of the pre-promotional videos, they have a lot of systems to check out, and it kind of ties into what you were saying earlier on, John. There's a lot of systems on board this craft that they're going to have to test and check out in flight for the first time. And the thing is that they're kind of happy to have the 19 hours to do it all in, because even if those systems are not used ever again, at least they know that they work, which is...
Well, that's the thing. It's like getting into an aircraft simulator of any sort, and changing it so an engine goes down, you lose rudder control or something like that. So those are all the things that Bob Boehner is going to be doing. That's his job, is to be able to fly the ship. And that's why it's going to take so long. Because the interesting thing here, just tying it back into the kind of the faux playtime that myself and Robbie would do in Elite Dangerous, one of the things you can do on the spacecraft in that particular video game is you can flick a switch and you turn off flight assist, and you will fly like you're really flying in space with booster rockets.
Pure Newtonian physics. It
is unbelievably difficult to control a vessel in that way. And the other thing is also that they're going to have to think about how much fuel. Every time you tap that button, there's a bit of fuel gone, and the fuel tank just goes lower and lower and lower, like a video game where you've almost endless fuel. That's a thing that they have to consider. So every maneuver is considered. And they, as they're traveling, this is all going to be done on their way to space. So with my little Lego capsule here, they'll be doing pitch, roll, and yaw maneuvers while still traveling towards the space station. They're not going to be flying the ship like this. They're literally going to be going on a trajectory and then rolling the ship in that kind of on that line towards the space station. So
in the very unusual spacecraft design, though, the Dragon actually has a thruster in the nose that can give about 40% of the nominal thrust from her main engine. So they do have a nominal thrust available there that they can work on. It's
interesting. I wonder would they have to blow the nose cap off to get that, to expose that one?
It pivots.
Oh,
it's an openable nose cap.
Oh yeah. It's interesting, and that's why the international docking hatch as well is of a certain sloped down shape, and that's the capsule's lid as it has been designed so that it can approach and dock while still hovering over the docking port, the international docking connection on the ISS. A few more people. Somebody said, "Oh yeah, one of the blonde lady who was interviewing." Frank's going, "Why it's 7 of 9 doing interviewing people? Let's go back in time." So Nikki's going. She's remembering a lot of the terms that we're using from one of the Starfleet Academy's courses. Andy, you're doing that as well, aren't you?
I'm doing the space flight history missions at the moment.
He's going to be more focused on terms like inertia, momentum, delta V.
Yeah.
Fun terms.
Yeah.
Alan Lynch says hello. Here we go. So Ad Astra, thanks for joining us and sticking around, guys. Just while we look at just coming up to T-minus 10 minutes for launch. So we're getting very close here.
Yep.
I think the two boys. What do you think, guys? Bob and Doug, they do this a lot. Doug does this. Bob is there. Is that to get the blood flow back into his hand? Or is it just
considering I'm nervous right now?
Yeah, I'm feeling a bit nervous. Yeah. So,
I'm excited. I'm nervous, and I'd say their hearts are racing right now.
Yeah, I would call it adrenaline. I think.
It's definitely that bit of that.
I don't know that they're both seasoned space vets, so I don't know that it's nervous the way you or I might be at this moment. But absolutely, they're full of adrenaline and anticipation, and I think also it's a very visible, highly visible, high-profile launch, so they're conscious of that too. The eyes of the world.
I think Robbie Terrence is just saying that Ireland was mentioned. Did you get that? Did you hear that in the feed?
Yes. So the spacecraft, as it enters into the second stage of its burn, once stage 1 separates, stage 2 and the Dragon of stage 2 of Falcon 9 and the Dragon itself will enter Irish airspace over Shannon Airport and cross from west to east over Dublin. So they're going to draw a line essentially from Shannon to Dublin.
So will it be dark enough to see? Now I have my camera set outside my window here in anticipation of seeing. I don't know. Will it just be a dot or will it be a streak? What's the?
I would say you're going to see a streak of light crossing the sky. This thing is going to be visible from about 13, 14 miles away. So
yeah,
I would say that this will be visible.
I'm in North County Dublin, so I'm in Malahide in North County Dublin. We're 8 miles north of the city centre here. We've got wispy stratus clouds outside the window. I can see. So that could, especially at the. Do we know what the degrees above the horizon?
It should be very close to the moon. If you look at your moon, the moon, it should be very close to the moon.
Who's that? Somebody saying. Terrence is saying about 42 degrees of. What's that?
No, I think he means 8:42 p.m. It should be visible.
Yeah, that's right. 8:42 p.m.
Yeah, 20 minutes after launch.
We have at a stage that we didn't get to on Wednesday. Now we have got crew displays have been configured for launch. So the crew displays have been changed from pre-launch prep to launch readiness.
Yeah. So
the boys are now ready to go.
This is 7 minutes 52. Everyone's watching. Very tentative. I have. I'll continue on that point. I have my camera waiting outside. I don't know if I'll get a good shot off. Obviously, you never know what. What about English time? I'm sure if it's going over Ireland, I think what's the difference? It's 6 minutes. Well, no, that's it's 26 minutes as the sun travels 26 minutes or something. No, that was the old time frame. I'm sure there's a calculation. John Hardy's asking that. So it's the same. So thanks for Terrence for giving us that information there. So Chris Moore from Astronomy Ireland has given it. It's supposed to pass under the moon. Where is the moon at the moment, guys? Does anybody know? Has anybody eyes on the moon?
Well, I know it's been I've been able to see it since I'd say 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon, and I can't really see because I've pulled down the blind, but as far as I know, it's still there.
Right where you left it.
Tell you what, the moon is directly south right now.
Okay, so it's directly outside my window then, because I'm facing south.
At the moment, it's funny to listen to the chat. Everything's gone completely silent on NASA's end. They're just the excitement there must be palpable. I'd say if you're in that room.
Oh, I'd say the tension must be unbearable.
Stage 1 engine chill has begun, so they're ready to start injecting liquid oxygen into the engine bell. So, engine has been completely loaded. They are continuing loading until about T-minus 3 minutes.
This is roughly the time frame that they scrubbed at on Wednesday.
It was a little bit earlier, I believe. So,
it was after the fuel up.
Yeah.
It was T-minus 16 minutes. They had to defuel about 50%.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Robbie, did I hear correctly that you are also either in or were in the Navy? The Irish Navy?
Merchant Navy. I was a merchant mariner for the better part of 8 years.
All right, yeah.
3 years training as an officer candidate and 5 years active service. I was just driving cruise liners and oil tankers. Nothing near as exciting as what you were doing. This is getting interesting now. This is the iconic image you would have seen during the kind of the Apollo missions of the cryogenic liquid has been oxidizing around the stages of the rocket now. So the idea is there is a series of cryogenic tanks on the outside of the rocket itself, which are designed to keep it cool, to make sure that the refrigerated components like the liquid oxygen, the liquid kerosene, and the liquid hydrogen stay liquid and stay as cold as humanly possible.
Well, I've just set up my camera outside, just outside the door here, directly at the moon. We've got good visibility at the height of the moon tonight from Dublin. I don't know what it's like around the rest of the country or even on the south side of the city. But here, as long as the clouds hold as they are in the next 25 minutes.
So they've just opened the clamp arm around stage 2, and they're about to start retracting the strongback, which is that large metal structure you see going up the spine of the rocket itself.
You can see it just underneath the black section of the Dragon module capsule there, just coming back.
It's only going to come back about 2 to 3 degrees. The idea is it will continue to support the rocket until the thrust is sufficient to actually balance the rocket on its end.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they get that initial motion, the rocket, you'll see the gantry arm just fall away completely.
Right. So, does anyone know what that hand symbol that he just did was?
Well, Bob initiated it and Doug reciprocated.
Maybe it's a baby, we're okay kind of thing.
Yeah, could be. We're at T-minus 3 minutes.
3 minutes to launch. This is where everyone starts getting quiet and hopeful.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Very historic launch pad as well, 39.
Yeah.
Very historic.
We were actually saying, so for those of you who might remember 39A, that same gantry, that same crew embarkation gantry was red back in the 60s.
That's right.
For the Apollo missions. And we were just saying it was beautiful that they simply repainted it and reconditioned it to this lovely new black and white color scheme instead of tearing it down and putting a new system up. Dragon has transitioned to internal power, as has Falcon 9.
Getting very close. T-minus 2 minutes, 15 seconds. The first mission to launch from 39A was Apollo 8. That's the first mission to go, and of course Apollo 11 and the Apollo missions afterwards.
Ooh, what's that now?
So that
That's water.
Oh, okay. That's cooling down the camera, obviously, is it?
Well, that is designed to dampen everything down so that when the rocket ignites, any excess exhaust from the rocket itself doesn't set fire to every piece of wildlife and every piece of grass around 39A. So
Yeah, that's true. Because it's all very dry.
So we're looking good at the moment. T-minus 130.
LOX load has been completed on stage 2, so fueling is complete.
So Capcom for this particular mission is actually out in California, in Hawthorne, in California. So this won't be Houston. This will be Hawthorne. SpaceX is Capcom. And Capcom stands for those of you who don't know or forgot or whatever, that Capcom means Capsule Communications.
Here we go. We're into the final 60 seconds.
So
now let's hope Bob's luck holds because he actually had a mission scrubbed at T-minus 8 seconds. So,
Doug, they've all been joking with him on the ground apparently because Doug has been scrubbed 5 times before a successful 6th launch in the past.
Good Lord.
He sat on top of the rocket 5 times before it's gone.
So he's well used to this. Here we go.
All right. Here we go.
Everything has been armed for launch. Final stations, there goes.
I'm going to turn up my sound here so I can hear it. I had to put it low.
15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7.
Who's got Magic Carpet Ride ready?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff. As the
There she goes.
There she goes.
And she's cleared the tower there.
She's cleared the tower.
And that starts the clock on board.
Start that clock.
Look at that speed build. 250 kilometers an hour already. 300 kilometers an hour.
KPH.
That's a very fast rocket. I mean, if you think back to the Saturn V, actually it was a very slow attempt, but it was a very fast rocket.
What?
That is
on my side of things. You should hear the screams in mission control of delight.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And 1D rolled out.
Max burn coming up.
Break the sound barrier.
Dynamic pressure.
Maximum dynamic pressure.
We're in the throttle bucket.
1 minute.
Reports say all systems are go.
Here she goes. 1000 K.
Yep. Max Q.
What's the sound barrier in kilometers? Do you remember?
I'd say she's broken it by now. I think it's about 3. No.
Back up to full power as we're through max Q.
Copy 1 Bravo.
So they throttle down coming up to max Q and then throttle back up. That's to do with heat dissipation and the level of the atmosphere they're in.
Yeah. So for anyone who's not aware, max Q is the maximum aerodynamic pressure that the module is going to be under. Now, you'll see this massive cloud behind it. This is going to be a braking thrust while you get ready for separation of stage 1.
Back engine chill. That's getting
Look at that plume. That's a different plume that we've ever seen before.
Into flight. Right now, everything continuing to look good.
Look at that, 3,500 kilometers an hour.
It's going to be triple. We'll have
Already at 40 kilometers above the Earth's
Engines
surface.
are about to burn out.
Look at that. Going to the Mako.
Second stage engine to continue to carry astronauts into orbit.
And the nice thing, if you saw inside the cockpit there as they took off, it's the first time that the guys have had a video picture of the Earth as they travel away from it. They've always had to look out the window before.
Take that, flat earthers.
On the first stage.
Yeah. Oh, what's that?
Here we go. Separation.
This will be first stage step.
Yeah.
And we have Miko.
Pico.
There it is.
Falcon stage separation.
There it goes. Woohoo. So the interesting thing to see here now is as Mako makes its way back down, Mako is going to land as well. So it's not just going to drop in the ocean. This is the cool thing about modern spaceflight.
Stage separation confirmed. The first stage beginning its flight back.
The astronauts now are at 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface. They are actually in microgravity now. So all that they're going to feel now is that thrust from the engine. Every time it goes on, they'll get that little pushback. Every time it cuts off, they'll actually be thrown forward a bit in their harnesses.
Eco or second engine cut off about 8 minutes and 44
I've
seconds.
had the opportunity to be weightless a few times in the aircraft Fat Albert, if you've ever seen the Blue Angels perform.
Oh, the Comet Vomit?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to fly with the Blue Angels 3 times. So I'm afraid
Oh, very nice, man. Very nice.
when that C-130 goes up and comes down real fast, in that period, you're actually weightless on board. So it's really kind of fun. I've floated in the back, and I've also been strapped in the cockpit. There's a bubble turret, and I got to sit there. You can see the whole world outside the aircraft. In that one, you don't get to float around as much, but you do float up against the straps, and so it's really quite a fun experience.
And did you have lunch before you went up? How did you?
I did actually. I didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem with it at all. I've done a lot of flying in my life. When I was a teenager, I was in Civil Air Patrol. Actually, got to go up with an astronaut in an F4, an old F4, when I was a teenager.
Was that the F4 Phantom?
Yeah, the F4 Phantom. The astronaut was a guy named Terry Hart, Colonel Terry Hart. He was in the New Jersey Air National Guard at the time.
Yeah.
And their aircraft that they flew was the F4 Phantom.
I have a friend of mine, and he's his favorite aircraft. A friend of myself and Frank's, his favorite aircraft is the F4 Phantom. If he ever spoke to you, he'd be super jealous and full of questions. That's my favorite aircraft.
Sexy aircraft.
John Hardy actually just sent me a very funny photo. He's watching, as well as watching themselves, he's also watching the CNN live stream.
Yeah.
Apparently, they had someone on who was the voice of Miles O'Brien.
That's right. That's right. That's on the Cuchulain's that's on the Cuchulain's page. That's right. It's there's one of the advisors on CNN. It's Miles O'Brien.
That's right. Yeah.
Look at the speed they're going. Like, because obviously they're out.
Speed is crazy.
10,500
kilometers an hour.
What is that like?
Now that is ground speed, not airspeed, right?
Oh,
minutes away from
That's
the
ground speed. So that's the thing. Relativistically now, they're actually traveling at approximately the same speed the ISS travels at every day.
That's right.
Yeah.
The ISS travels at about 12,000 miles per hour every day.
Right.
I think it's 9 or 12 orbits. I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
But relativistically in space, that's the thing. You got to remember, they're going to be traveling incredible speeds, but they're going to be traveling relative speed to the ISS. They're only going to be traveling about 300 or 400 kilometers an hour.
So I'm going to throw up here on the feed. I'm throwing up here. This is the current position of the ISS. So the ISS there is going to pass over Ireland in about 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got just 10 minutes coming up for Dragon to go across Irish skies, and then an hour in 90 minutes you'll have ISS. So I just thought I'd throw that over there for you guys to see. So we're back to
stage 2 propulsion is still good.
Stage
A little over
propulsion.
3 minutes until Dragon physically separates from the
So
second.
if anyone's kind of wondering, on the left-hand side of the stream here, this is the view of the bell of the engine of stage 2, which is still attached to Falcon 9.
continuing
Which is still attached to Dragon, sorry. And it's continuing burning. It's going to continue to burn till 8 minutes and 44 seconds.
first stage.
The right-hand side of our screen is actually stage 1 on return to Earth. So,
See the descent and see it land on a platform.
yep.
yeah, that's
That's pure 50s science fiction stuff. 40s, 50s science fiction.
Isn't it? It really is, yeah.
You know,
it is.
Now that they've started the retrograde burn. So,
So that will slow the descent.
mhm.
And those fins, they are articulating so they can control the attitude of the rocket itself.
Yep.
Okay.
So just like a normal aircraft, although very limited compared to an aircraft, and as I'm sure Michael will know, this particular rocket, the stage 1, can pitch and yaw as she needs to in order to make her way to
Right
the
there
rendezvous.
with, there's roll thrusters going there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Another shot of it inside the capsule there.
and look at the view. I wonder now. That's a question I would have just looking at that central view. Is that their view from a camera, or is that like a virtual view just to kind of show this is where you are over the planet?
I think it's the latter, Jono. I think it's
Yeah, it looks like a virtual.
Looks like a GPS, quite literally a global positioning system.
Yeah.
Mm.
I would say that's
a camera for that. To get that would have to be really far away to get that much of the camera.
It could be a super wide angle lens. You know?
That's really far away.
well, I mean,
the
right
time,
now they're only 10 minutes into launch and they're already 200 kilometers up. So
Yeah.
There we go. There's mission control.
Oh,
Let's
there's a shot
go
of.
Hawthorne, California. So that's why it looks different. That is SpaceX mission control. This is the barge.
There's the what's the barge?
The barge for the descent of the rocket.
Doesn't look too nice out there, wherever that is.
This looks more familiar to Robbie and I.
oh yeah, that's the North
That's out
Atlantic
in the
right there.
that's the North Atlantic, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
What? How would you rate the swell there? How would you,
well, that's only about a 1 meter swell, Michael. Oh, she's touched down already.
Hmm.
Blackout for touchdown. That was pretty.
Wow, that was,
Oh, okay.
fast.
So, well, there we go. So that's the rocket itself. That's the Falcon 9. She's back down. She's reusable. Look at that, phenomenal. And those legs just extending out like just classic 1950s night park.
It's like
Well, that's
Expect the door to
Stage.
open. The big rock.
yeah, it's about to come out. Yeah.
Klaatu walks down a ramp. You
Yeah.
know.
yeah. Just imagine it's one of those waddling rockets. It'd just be like, dur, 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 dur.
Oh, they're gonna do it.
Oh, look.
Oh.
He must have got that from one of his kids.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's Bob.
So they've
He's trying to-
they've officially declared stage 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the mission successful. Stage 1 being
That's great.
countdown, stage 2 being launch, stage 3 being separation, and stage 4 being recovery of Falcon 9. So
And look at that. You can see now that they're weightless because their arms are just floating. They don't have to leave their fingers in any particular position. Here come they're taking their gloves off, being given the go-ahead to take their safeties off.
So we do expect that
main engine burn first. Stage 2 has been shut down.
they do wait until they have full confirmation that it is ready.
So Nikki Ward says, the first dinosaur in space.
Oh,
There we go. Sparkly sequin codes. First dinosaur in space. Don't forget, guys, those of us in Ireland and the UK, we've just about 7 minutes. You want to be taking a trip outside to have a look up at the moon to see if you can see. It might be too bright, especially if there's if she's not burning.
In about 30 seconds or so, we're looking at stage 2 separation from Dragon Capsule. So this will be the first time Dragon has been free with a manned mission on board, flying under its own power.
What do you think about the spacesuits?
I love them.
Yeah, they were sleek. Aren't
yeah, pretty cool.
I think they're. And look at that. Look at that. Look at that. What's it called again? The connection to the leg. I mean, back in
life support connection.
the Russians still have like the 5 different connections.
Yeah, they don't have the exterior tubings. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It all slipped
There we
down.
go.
Now that looks familiar anyway. It's watching.
Yeah.
And to think that that's live, and also in this day and age, that's a HD camera.
And there's that call out.
80 or 4K image, presumably to the ones we're used to from the 60s.
International Space Station today.
Like an IMAX camera, I would imagine.
You think they could put an IMAX up there on that?
Yeah, IMAX was developed for the space program.
IMAX is so those of you who don't know, IMAX camera is a 50 millimeter piece of film, and unlike a lot of other an awful lot of other cameras, it spun horizontally, whereas most cameras 35mm spun vertically. But now IMAX cameras that are digital, it means that the pickup is 50mm pickup, as opposed to the camera I have outside, which is a 5D Mark IV Canon, that has a 35mm pickup, because that became the standard for making film. So having a 50mm pickup, that means you can get so much more light in there, depending on the lens, of course. Would be a wide-angle fisheye lens, so they can see as much as possible on top of that particular pickup. Looking at about 6 minutes, guys, before we should all run outside and attempt to have a look under the moon.
Well, here's the thing now. Here's the fun part: is stage 2 is free and clear, and that will burn up in Earth's atmosphere. Most of it will return and splash down somewhere off the coast of Hawaii. Believe it or not, it will come. It will, although it seems to be traveling backwards from the spacecraft, it is also traveling forwards at about 12,000 kilometers per hour. So it will actually complete near a full orbit before its orbit degrades enough that it will hit the atmosphere. It will slow down dramatically from about 12,000 kilometers an hour to about 200 kilometers per hour, and it will smack into the Pacific Ocean about 500 kilometers off the coast of Hawaii.
So that's unlike a lot of the other pieces from SpaceX. This one will do the old-fashioned splashdown.
And it will not be recovered, right? I mean, this is just space junk at this point, right?
Nope, it has to be recovered. Believe it or not, the U.S. Navy is going out to recover it.
All right.
This would have been one of your jobs, Michael, when you were still serving.
So I think
I don't get all the memos anymore.
Jason Faulkner is asking exactly that question. Where does that part go now that's disconnected? So 500 miles off the coast of Hawaii, and some U.S. Naval Force ship will be sent out to retrieve that.
Now again, that's based on
a lot of Navy in that neighborhood.
Sorry, say that again.
A lot of Navy in that neighborhood. So.
Oh yeah.
That's also is that the secondary headquarters for naval intelligence as well, isn't it?
We have some there. Yeah, we have the Pacific fleet, Pac fleet.
Right, and that's of course because most of the people here on watching this would be, all fans of science fiction and TV genres. Obviously, that's where the TV character Thomas Magnum or Magnum PI, that's where he served when he came back from Vietnam, and naval intelligence was out in Hawaii.
Well, now what you're seeing, guys, if anyone's curious as to why the feed's cut out, you're seeing them now switch between different pickup stations. So the bandwidth for the transmission from the engine bell camera is a lot lower than the bandwidth for the transmission from the actual crew cabin. So what you're seeing there is that there's multiple radio listening stations positioned around the world that have a partnership with both NASA and SpaceX to transmit the signal back to mission control. So although the spacecraft systems, believe it or not, the spacecraft systems are still on FM radio, like the original spacecraft systems on the Saturn V and on the Apollo system. But this particular craft is obviously using a much more high band frequency for the
I'm just
crew.
trying to sort this out for a sec. Sorry, guys.
You're outside.
I have outside, so I just have to swap this over.
Okay.
So in a couple of minutes, I mean, it's blue
You
skies.
see anything out there, Jono?
It's blue skies out here. I see a seagull.
You're in North Dublin. You're about to see a seagull.
I think Dragon's a bit higher than a seagull.
Even 4 pixels wide on the screen, I'd say. So I'm going to switch on. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but like way up there, about a pixel would be the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
You have a telescope for that or no?
I have a 300mm lens on it, and it's a 35mm pickup, so it's not what you'd need.
There's a lot of ambient light there in Dublin, so.
Yeah, it's summertime. Doesn't get dark. Cool.
It's funny to watch now that even at the live broadcast center, they have the 2 meter social distancing, on the perspex screens between each host.
Oh, I never noticed that now. Have I noticed that now?
Do you see that gentleman's patch that says 25 on it? Do you know what that is?
That's Leland.
Leland.
Under his name badge, you'll see a small trapezoid patch that says 25. That's the 25. That's the Mach 25 club. It's Mach 25 to break out of the Earth's atmosphere. And so astronauts who have traveled that and made it into low Earth orbit, they're members of the Mach 25 club, and it dates back at least through the space shuttle program, probably into the Skylab and Apollo era. So it's sort of an elite astronaut club. Nothing official, but you'll see that patch a lot on astronauts' flight suits.
It's funny you say that because Bob has the same patch on his flight suit. You'll also notice that
the astronaut up there?
Between Bob and Doug, they actually have two different nameplates on their flight suits. So Bob, being a veteran military pilot, has a red backing behind his nameplate, whereas Doug has the standard black. So apparently there's still a tradition where ex-military pilots coming into NASA have that military service recognized with a special nameplate that they wear on their flight suit on a day-to-day basis. So both Doug and Bob now are, if they weren't before, they are now members of the Mach 25 club, that's for sure.
They both are. They're both space vets. They've both flown before. So to get into low Earth orbit, they would have had to break the Mach 25. So, but yeah, they're renewed their membership for certain. They're all paid up.
So somebody...
Secretary of State and the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary.
I'm going to pop outside, guys, and see if I can see it, and I'll be back in 2 minutes. 1 sec.
I know I won't see it from here. There's way too much around me for me to get a clear view of it.
Where are you, Robbie?
Leak slip. So.
Okay, yeah. I like leak slip. I grew up in Ireland.
I'm out here with a 300 mil lens for maximum zoom. The moon is still, only a few mil across.
For a long time now.
I'll show you. So this is the view that I'm getting on my tiny little screen. So the moon is beautiful, but I have it tilted a little bit low to see if there's anything in the sky. So it's hard to see. I mean, you'd probably need like 1,000 mils or a proper telescope with a camera attached to see anything.
Is RTE covering this as well, or no?
I don't
highly
know.
doubt it. I highly doubt it.
They might have a telescope on it.
To answer your question, Andrew Brannigan, no, this proves that the Earth is round. Thank you very much.
What?
I find it incredible to this day that there's still people who believe the Earth is flat.
That was actually a funny joke that was used in the Space Force.
It was, yeah.
They had a congressional hearing, and they had the oldest guy you can imagine as a Republican congressman.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out who that was supposed to be taken to,
And God made this beautiful, beautiful flat Earth.
Yeah, and only God can make it orange. if you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about.
I do, yeah.
I think I'll have to watch that tonight.
Yeah,
it's well worth the watch. I've only seen the first or the second episode.
It's very good. Like
I've seen the first 3 episodes. I was pacing myself. Otherwise, I'd fall asleep and I'd miss it.
Like Steve Carell is great, but John Malkovich, he's just fantastic.
Yeah,
he just does humor so well.
He makes the show.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's 2 minutes past. She's probably already gone.
Yeah, I couldn't see her either. So
it was a beautiful, clear night here out in Dublin. I got some shots off of the moon, but that's about it. There's nothing to see. Even Polaris is not out yet, so you're definitely not going to be seeing any rockets passing by, or even just small space capsules. So I'm gonna knock all that off.
As much as I hate to say it, John, I think we should cut away from the NASA feed right now. Just they've gone into the politics.
Oh yeah, we don't want to hear that.
So
the space here.
Now, they are still reiterating that the goal is, as is the tagline or the opening line of Space Force, boots on the moon by 2024. So
That's right. Yeah.
I suppose, for lack of a better word, they've taken the first step on that. You know, it's an interesting day in our lives, guys, to have been here and
it's
watched
historical.
history.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. It's important to make the distinction of Elon Musk's vision as opposed to Space Force vision. Again, as I said earlier, the very idea of Space Force is an open-ended question as to its legality, because of the treaties that we've signed not to militarize space, and it's a slippery slope. If we put forces up there, then Chinese and the Russians, and it's a slippery slope. So putting all of that aside, Elon Musk's vision is obviously to colonize Mars, and so this is a really interesting time because we're seeing not only a civilian agency, NASA, but we're seeing a private company put men into orbit, and that's the first time we've seen that. We have not had a commercial spacecraft. As I think Jono was saying on Wednesday, that the Dragon Capsule can seat up to 7 people to include space tourists. Now, I don't know that you and I are going to be of the type that can afford a ticket aboard Dragon, but
I'll look for it in a second. But it's like a minimum of $1 million a ticket or something.
Yeah.
Okay. So we win the lotto, maybe.
And are they promising orbital flights or suborbital flights?
They're promising orbital with Dragon.
Orbital. Okay. So you got to remember that the first American in space, Alan Shepard, he was up and down, up and back, suborbital, 15 minutes. The first American orbit was John Glenn, made several orbits, but the Soviets, Yuri Gagarin, they put their first man into orbit. So Yuri Gagarin was in orbit in 1961. But no, this is a commercial spacecraft, and this is a landmark moment for a routine travel to space. That's the goal, to where we can be launching not just military and government astronauts to do scientific missions on the moon, but sending heavy lift cargo to the moon, building a base there, possibly a refueling station where you can oxidize and for fuel, and then move past the moon and go straight to Mars, and bring with you, even the space. What is it? The Starship craft that just unfortunately exploded the other day. That's made of steel, not carbon. So that's designed so that when it does get to Mars, it can be cannibalized and be made into other things for settlers. So it's a really interesting time in our lives to see this commercial spacecraft, and I think that we should.
Just looking it up here, back in 2008, they were saying that it cost about $10,000 a pound to go to space. So a pound, an imperial measurement of pound in weight. So if an astronaut averages about 200 pounds in weight, it costs $2 million just for that person to go into space. So that's the kind of cost you're looking for. So even if you have, a small thing so that dinosaur,
like an orange,
like orange,
Like an orange, yeah.
that push little dinosaur that Bob has taken up would weigh, what would you say, half a pound, quarter pound?
Probably, yeah, about $5,000 to put that in orbit.
Yeah, just to stick that in the capsule, $2,500, $5,000 is worth it.
Now, if I were up there, I'd bring Dustin up with me.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Only if you could play 32 counties.
I went to UCD and in the 90s, so a friend of mine got me that, and it still cracks me up. So
I obviously we all grew up with Dustin.
then too, yeah, I love it.
Zig and Zag, 1987 was their first. 1987, Zig and Zag arrived on planet Earth.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
I bumped into Ian Dempsey, the television presenter. So yeah, and then a couple of years later, their family sent them a friend, and we got Zuppy,
That's right.
the blue puppet
I
dog.
forgot about him.
Yeah, Zigzag,
Ziggy, Zaggy, and Zuppy, right? Ziggy, Zaggy, Zuppy.
Zigzag, and Zuppy were the
Zigzag and Zuppy, yeah.
space aliens that presented kids television in Ireland back in 1987 to, God, when did they go off the air?
was
Oh,
about
sometime in the 90s.
In the
They moved
90s,
it.
Dustin sort of eclipsed them all.
Well, Dustin came in,
Yeah.
See, Dustin eclipsed them all, but then they brought on Socky the sock monster to kind of complement Dustin and kind of be more child friendly than the cynical old turkey.
Rocky had the blue bucket.
But I suppose we're getting a little bit off topic.
Just a touch. Just a touch.
It's Irish space aliens that help bring up our children in Ireland.
That's
But
right.
yes, it's now again the whole point of Elon making the Falcon 9, just to go back to your original point, John, the whole point of the Falcon 9 being reusable was to try and mitigate that cost, or as they kind of said, about half that cost.
Yeah.
To bring it to a more manageable level, hopefully. And as somebody points out, don't forget Podge and Raj.
So,
Of course, yeah.
Of course, yeah.
SSB is down.
They're creepy, but I like them.
Yeah.
Go say that again, Robbie. Sorry, I was just trying to pull up the ISSB. Say that again.
Don't forget Podge and Raj.
Well, you see, that's where Zig and Zag disappeared to. The
They went to England.
They went to England for a while, but when they came back, Podge and Raj are the puppeteers, Zig and Zag. So
I'm never going to be invited back on your broadcast. Right off topic.
They've actually shut down the stream from KSC now, so they've signed off from Mission Control in California.
Yeah. From Mission Control in Hawthorne. So yeah, I've just got the feed running in the back behind me to Launch America. I tried to switch over to the ISS there just to get something spacey in the background, but same as on Wednesday, the ISS feed is down while the launch is conducting. So I don't know why that is. They're just getting a red screen on the ISS feed on that. So
they haven't fixed the new computers that they sent up 3 days ago. That's the problem.
They're rebooting the station. They shut down, reboot, and try again.
That's it. Yep.
Like every time I turn, if I don't do a sequence on my tower, it forgets how to put sound into my TV. So I have to. There's a certain operational thing on that. Michael, remind me again. What was it your father did as part of the space program? He was akin to the space program in some way as well.
Yes, he worked for IBM, and he was a computer programmer. So he helped program the flight computers on the command module.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is kind of one of my dad's favorite stories. And for many years, he had this thing on his wall. When he passed away, I looked in vain for it. I don't know where it is, but unfortunately, it's lost. But I was born right in the middle of Apollo 13. I was born April 12th, 1970. So that's the day after the launch of Apollo 13.
Right.
So my father was down at Mission Control. Now, he didn't work in the Mission Control that you see in the movies. He was what they call a backroom boy. So there was a room behind there, with large computer banks. And thanks. Mm-hmm. And he worked there. So he was, at this point, the moonshots were relatively routine in 1970. In fact, they were talking about like no one was watching them anymore.
Yeah.
So he was going to come home and see his firstborn child. So he was back at the hotel, and then they called him back and they said, "Joe, you got to come back. We've got a problem." So he had to work on helping the astronauts come home. And of course, we all know how that went. And when about a week or so after everybody was sort of like cool,
relaxed again,
and relaxed. The contractors on my dad's side, who worked on the command module, got an invoice from the contractors who worked on the lunar module, because it was used in purposes not designed under the contract.
That's right. It was Boeing. It was Bell Boeing who created the lunar module, the lunar lander.
That's right.
That famous line in it said, "Look, I only know what it was designed to do. I can't tell you what it's going to do if you keep lighting it up and turning it off again.
And so, but because the command module is the only component that has a heat shield, it had to be towed. I mean, it was dead. The command module was completely dead. No life support, nothing. And so the astronauts all piled into, 3 astronauts piled into a craft made for 2. And that craft is now towing the command module back to Earth. And then they transfer to the command module and try to re-enter. So they got a bill for towing, a towing bill at 20, which the standard fee for towing in 1970 was 25 cents a mile. So they
That's a lot of miles.
now, obviously, it was a joke. It was meant just for levity, but it was a great. It just shows you the kind of humor that these guys had. You know.
Oh, you had me going. I thought that this was a real bill, man.
Could you imagine?
I don't think they intended it to be paid, but
The first commercial salvage mission in space.
Yeah.
But no, he
Very
was
good.
a programmer. He worked on the flight systems.
Cool.
Okay.
And if you
Very good.
ever saw the film, what is it called? Hidden Figures. Have you seen Hidden Figures?
Yeah, well, watch it there recently. Yeah. Very good film.
The heavier actress, I can't think of her name. She's won Oscars. She played the character that she played, the woman that she played, not a character, was my father's boss at NASA.
Wow.
Because my father worked mainframes. He worked mainframes. So she did all the mainframes. And she was, the film takes place in the Mercury era, which is before my dad's time. My dad came in only for the Apollo program, but she was still working at NASA at that point, and she was in charge of mainframes. So
yeah,
it's kind of an interesting.
Was it Dorothy Vaughan, Janelle Monáe, Jackson?
Dorothy Vaughan, I think. Dorothy Vaughan.
Yeah.
No, it's actually a great piece of cinema that goes to show, because again, like a lot of people kind of wonder, where did it come from? Where did the term computer come from? And it's one of those things where it actually originated with the Mercury program, because instead of, pulling up your machine and Googling the answer, or, putting in the numbers into a computer and running a program, they would give the problem to a set of computers, literally people who would compute the answer to the problem.
Yeah.
In a room in NASA HQ in Houston.
Down in the basement.
This room, the whole room was just devoted desks and calculators and slide rules. But predominantly, most of the employees who ran these computations were African American females.
Women, yeah.
For years and years and years, NASA scientists refused to recognize their work until eventually it got to a point where IBM developed the first mainframe computer to automate the process of computation in NASA headquarters.
Sorry, Robbie, shall us
IBM.
go? If anybody hasn't seen Hidden Figures, this is spoilers.
Yeah, sorry. Spoilers.
Probably should have said that. Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it was primarily African American women. They were actually a minority within the group. It was mostly men, but so even their coworkers didn't accept them because they felt that they should be getting coffee. Yeah. So, but it was the women who really were the standout stars.
But the IBM engineers actually couldn't get their own machine to run the computations necessary to calculate orbital burns, which, they built it, they programmed it, and they couldn't get it to work. They couldn't get it to actually do the job. And this was after they had spent, I think it was about $2.5 million on it. Now, back in the 50s, that's $2.5 million in 50s money, which is the equivalent to about 50 or 60 million today. It's stupid, but the IBM engineers came in, installed this whole thing, which took up about, I think it was 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, something huge. But yeah, it was one of the women who worked as a computer for NASA who actually looked at the program cards and figured out, well, actually, if you replace this one here and this one here, and obviously there was a lot more to it than the story will tell you on a film, because spending 3 days figuring out a computational problem is not very sexy filmmaking.
Exactly that thing that she was doing back then is what Boeing Starliner do now before they can do their manned mission. and possibly have to do another demo mission. They might have to do demo mission to unmanned next year when they finally get through all their lines of code that caused the clocks to not sync properly and burn fuel 11 hours early, causing them to lose their opportunity to dock with ISS. So I just pulled this off the camera, guys. I'm going to share this with you. This is the moon over Dublin tonight. So that is the moon just a few minutes ago. That shot came out real nice. So I was quite happy with that. You can see the. I don't know how well the internet.
Tranquility there, and it's a really nice, real clear shot of that hemisphere.
It is. It's very clear. You can see some of the craters.
It's where is Tranquility now? There's a good question. There's somebody who might know. I don't know.
So you're moving your cursor there, Jono. Put it on the big gray spot right, a little now down to the right, and now that little inlet, that little bay at the bottom.
There.
You're on the Sea of Tranquility.
Wow. If I just play with the settings here, and we go. Let's see how good the resolution is of this particular photo.
Oh, goodness, look at those craters.
I think we pull up.
See, where's my?
That's a great camera you have, Jono.
It's the 5D Mark IV. It is a good camera. I should be able to get a. Where's my tool? I want the hand inspector. So no, not the inspector. Magnifier. Oh, there we go. Well, that's another jobby. Can I? No. Where's my?
Sea of Tranquility is just on camera there. Just now it's gone. There. Yeah.
I'll have to use the old-fashioned keyboard. So you're talking about right here.
That's right.
So Sea and Tranquility. So we have to zoom in. There we go. Tranquility Base. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy on the ground.
We just got stamps. U.S. has just published 50th anniversary stamps, and there's a silver dot where the Sea of Tranquility is.
Oh yeah, just about early. Hang on a second.
Wow, yeah.
Give me a second. Keep it held up there, Michael. I'm gonna do this.
He's just gonna make you big.
Yeah, I'll make you big.
Make you big. Ah, okay. Yeah.
Wow.
Just below. It's like the Man in the Moon has a tear.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
So that is, and then of course what you're showing us right there is just this area is that's lovely. That's a really nice piece. So you're showing this where I'm circling here at my cursor. That's where Apollo 11 landed.
Look, yeah, on the upper side, right there, right about there. Move to the right, to the right, to the right, right there.
Right here.
It's right on the edge of the Sea of Tranquility.
Wow, that's absolutely fantastic. There's on the Oculus Rift there is a mission where you can it's a virtual thing. It was written by an Irish company, which was fantastic for the mission, for the Apollo 11 mission, and it takes you through launch, separation, and all the pieces while you're sitting in your own chair at home. And one of the things it does is when you get to the moon, you have the option to either just let the experience play out and it'll land you just like Neil landed the module, or you can take control yourself and attempt to land the lunar module yourself by very similar controls that without feedback, forced feedback obviously, but the controls that Neil Armstrong had available to him with Buzz calling out information to him as he did it. And of course, Neil went right to the wire. He used all his fuel to land, didn't he?
Yes, they were out of fuel, and they were concerned about landing in a boulder field and overturning. And if they overturned, they would never have gotten off the moon because they wouldn't have been able to lift to right the ship. So it was precarious right until the end.
So what we're talking about is this module right here.
That doesn't look very lifelike accurate there, Jonah.
Yeah, I know. It's the best representation to put my hand on right now. But that's what we're talking about. They had to land this on the moon, and if it had turned over, even at 6 gravity, they'd never be able to push it over.
Mm.
So that's the fantastic things, and that's the type of things that your father was working on, though, that era of the space program.
Yeah, it was a fantastic time. It was very optimistic and hopeful. Kept my dad out of Vietnam.
Well, that's
it was a remarkable thing just to meet astronauts and just to know that there was a movement towards making this future that we all look to. I don't know if you guys saw on Cuchulain today. There was an article that was posted about wanting to build a monument, statue to Miles O'Brien.
Yeah.
And about a statue or a plaque or
there was a question about like what are the locals going to call it, like the floozy and the jacuzzi and the tart with a cart. But
yeah, you know what they call the location we have Dublin Comic Con every year?
What's that?
So the convention center in Dublin is called the Tube and the Cube.
The Tube. You guys are great for witty nicknames, but I went ahead and signed the petition. I figure I'm a citizen, so why not? And I signed the petition, and then I made a comment, and my comment was basically saying that we absolutely should have this statue because it shows that Ireland is by the 24th century. Ireland is a technological country, a very compassionate country. Star Trek is very optimistic, and I think that that's what the world needs right now, is that kind of optimism and forward-looking, looking towards the future.
Well said, Michael. Well said.
Well, I mean, if there's any
anyone can bring that optimism out in our best nature, I think the Irish can. So,
I think the only problem with trying to get a statue of Miles O'Brien and obviously the likeness of being Colin Meaney is that people in Dublin are more likely to give him a statue from the Snapper.
Or the commitments.
He also played that detective, wasn't he? Didn't he play that detective up in Belfast?
Which one was that now? I can't remember.
He did this TV series or whatever, mini series. He played a detective with the Northern Ireland Police Service. Formerly, he was RUC, I think, and investigating a series of murders in Belfast. It was good. It was a good series.
There was a mini series back in the 90s, early 90s that only ever came out in the States, and I don't believe it's ever appeared over here, where he played a leprechaun. A mini series that came out in the States, and it never appeared over here. Ortiz never bought it, so I've never seen it, but I have seen the trailer for it. It's up there somewhere in the world. So
I think he was wise in that decision, probably. I think it would infuriate all of you.
So, but yeah.
As at the risk of getting into politics, but there's a film called The Journey, where it was a what if situation. If Ian Paisley, what did the conversation in a long car ride between Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness, and he was excellent in that. It was really.
He was very good in that film. Yeah, very good.
Yes, that was.
Timothy Spall, I think, played.
Timothy Spall was playing Paisley.
Yeah.
They really were.
That was. I think I remember what movie you're talking about. I can't remember the title of it right now, but yeah, there's a lot of good stuff like that.
It's called The Journey.
Oh, it's called The Journey. There you go. There's also, if you want to look at stuff like that, you should check out The Foreigner with Jackie Chan, where we have Pierce Brosnan doing a very good Jerry Adams alike.
He was, his beard was remarkable in that film.
I'll save it for another time, but I have Jerry Adams story as well.
Yeah.
I lived when I was working at the Irish Embassy there, American Embassy.
For anyone interested, actually, Dragon has actually crossed to the dark side of the planet. So she's now in she's now in the Earth shadow, which means now she's started that process of slowly orbiting the Earth at 14,000 kilometers an hour.
Holy shit.
trying to close up in relativistic speeds.
Where's it gone? Oh, there it is. ISS tracker. So it's a pity you can't. I have the ESA ISS tracker here, and it's a pity that it doesn't have. You can't get the same information for
Dragon.
The capsule as it advances towards as they're going to meet. So that's. She's the ISS down there in Australia, so we'll see how fast she'll be coming up again over Ireland in a while. But look how much she's traveled since, what was it, when we started, an hour ago. She's made it from Ireland to Australia. It's just how fast things are going there. But that's, always find that type of thing interesting. And the other night we were talking about the fact that it's funny that you wouldn't want Windows running the space program, but in the ISS Mission Control, this a similar window to this one is, I remember watching it years ago, and down here in the corner, you would see that very familiar blue Windows XP start button.
Jono, I'm looking at this, at the trajectory here of the ISS, and you'll see that it passed over Ireland roughly, it looks like around Waterford, maybe.
Yeah, well, it looks like, it was more over Jerry Lynch's head there, Kerry.
Oh, yeah, Dunkirk.
Kerry and Cork.
Yeah. So
I got everything Dunkirk.
And then Dragon passed north of that in Dublin, over Dublin. So
yeah,
that means that it has a different trajectory, which is leading, obviously, leading the ISS, so that they will rendezvous in, at a future point. So that arc would be higher for Dragon. So and if you can do relative speed, I would imagine that she's probably somewhere around India, maybe right now.
Right. So Dragon would be around here right now, following on.
The ISS currently orbits it. So just if anyone's curious, the ISS completes a full orbit of Earth in 93 minutes at 400 kilometers high.
That's great.
So Dragon is only half that right now. And the thing is, the idea of just boosting straight up to 400 kilometers, it can't happen. That's why they wanted to launch on Wednesday, was the path to the ISS would have only been about 12 hours or so. But now, they have the fun of slowly drifting up to 400 kilometers and then, maintaining a relativistic speed of, plus or minus 5 kilometers an hour with something that does a full rotation of the Earth, which is, let's face it, the Earth is 20,000 kilometers radius, isn't it? It's about that.
I know it travels 37 miles an hour, so through space. Did anyone else or anybody else out there in the comments, the people that are still sticking around with us, or anybody in Q Forward, they did release a Dragon X or a Dragon module app, or there was a app via browser available for docking the Dragon to the space station on your iPad. So it's the original thing to give you an idea of how the astronauts would control docking the capsule to the ISS. And it wasn't, on the app, which is obviously designed to be fun just as much as it is designed to be, akin to what they're doing up there. But I found it particularly easy. I completed it and had fuel left over. So, did anyone else get that one? Did anyone see that?
No, though I have played a few bits of Kerbal Space Program over the last couple of hours, over the last couple of days. So that's
for those of us who don't know what that is.
So Kerbal Space Program, for anyone who's not aware, is essentially it's a cutesy NASA emulation program, if that makes any sense. So you have to quite literally start from scratch with your first vehicle assembly building, which is that tall building that a few people you saw in a few of those lovely shots there. And you to build your rocket from the engine bell up to the launch capsule itself. The idea is you have to push it out, launch it, get it into orbit, conduct some science experiments, bring it back down, and you have 3 Kerbals on board who are your astronauts, and they all have to survive.
Right.
They don't necessarily survive.
Kim saying she'll look out for it for kids, but Terrence just posted the link first. Thanks, Terrence. Terrence is running kind of IT for us there in the background, which is very kind of him. But yeah, let's click onto that on your iPad and see how you do. I'd be interested to see how you do. I completed. I woke up one morning, saw it was in my feed, and just went had a play, and was able to dock at the space station before I got up for breakfast. So that was pretty cool.
It's also compatible with desktops.
Is it also compatible? Well, if you're playing with desktop, you'll have to play with your mouse. But if you play it on the iPad, at least you can use your thumb controls. I still prefer a HOTAS system myself. Michael, did you ever become? Did you ever become a pilot? Did you ever qualify? Flying?
No. I got a solo license when I was 16, but that's as far as I ever went. I was, like I said earlier, I was in Civil Air Patrol when I was a teenager, and I was in the flight training program for that. With Cessnas, Cessna 172.
Yeah, I was just about to say 2-seater 172. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I got as far as soloing. A friend of mine became an airline pilot, so he's an airline pilot now for United.
Right.
So, but we both started together. We soloed together. Then he got his instrument rating, and then he went on from there. Went to University of Florida, Melbourne, aerospace engineering, and then became a commercial airline pilot. So, but no, I like I said, I didn't have the math, so I didn't go into those engineering type fields.
So when you were part of the, you were enlisted in the Army first.
Mm-hmm.
Did you volunteer, or was the draft still on when you were a kid?
The draft ended. I want to say the draft ended in 1975. Myself being 5 years old at the time, so
right.
No danger of being drafted. Although we do still register for the draft.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I volunteered. I enlisted when I was 19 years old.
Right.
Went in. I was infantry for a time, and then I was military police, and then they recruited me into intelligence. I did intelligence and military police and intelligence about equal time,
right.
and then I got commissioned in the Navy as an intel officer.
So, what made you transfer from one branch to the other?
Actually, it was a naval officer. I was working in a joint environment. So joint being all the services work together. And I was working at the Defense Intelligence Agency at the time. And I was working for a Navy captain, which would be the same as an Army colonel. And I was a sergeant, and he said to me, you have a master's degree from Georgetown and you speak a bunch of languages. Why doesn't the Army commission you? And I said, I can't speak for the Army. And so he put me in for a direct commission.
Right.
And then the general I was working for wanted me to put in for a direct commission with the Army as a condition for a release. So we put the packets in together. And then the Army sent me to Iraq. So when the Army sent me to Iraq, they just pushed pause on the packet.
Right.
But the Navy kept the packet moving along.
Right.
So while I was in Iraq in 2003, I was commissioned as
Desert Storm 2, was it?
We called it Iraqi Freedom then. Yeah, Iraqi Freedom.
Okay.
Yep. Iraqi Freedom 1.
Invasion number 4, or Iraqi Freedom.
If you're counting, yeah.
Right. Okay. Go on. Sorry.
But no. So I was commissioned. My date of rank for ensign was August 28th, 2003. But I didn't even know it. I was at this point in Iraq. Iraq was still very sort of Wild West. We just didn't have the infrastructure that you did later on. I went back to Iraq in 2008. It was like a completely different war. And
sorry. Just I know you're telling in the middle of telling the story. But from our point of view, for most of the guys here, we're in our late 30s, 40 this year. The word you used there just is interesting for a conversational point. You went over first in 2003, 2004, and then you said you went back but you didn't say it was a very different place. You said it went back and it was a very different war.
Yes.
Just an interesting use of words, you know. Sorry, continue. It's just
it was a different place and a different environment. It was a different war in the fact that when we were there in 2003, we had multiple enemies that we were confronting. We had Saddam's forces. We had the Fedayeen, which were sort of partisan forces basically essentially allied with the Saddam's forces. Then we had foreign fighters, and of those foreign fighters, several of them would also have been Al Qaeda or what we now know as ISIS.
Right.
So there was a lot of different things happening in 2003, and it was very difficult to keep it straight. Who am I dealing with? I mean, the most obvious being if you were coming up against Iraqi army tanks, you knew who they were. But other than that, I mean, they all looked the same. By 2008, it was very much a counterterrorism campaign. So, you know, the government was, Saddam had been defeated, and the government was sort of being a puppet of both the United States and Iran. It was a weird arrangement.
So your biggest fear would be IEDs more so than tank
IEDs, exactly, and lots of mortaring, but technologically, I mean, we lived in these, we call them chews. They're like basically large trailers, and they would be air conditioned. I didn't have any of that when I was back there in 03. I didn't have any air conditioning at all. I would sleep outside. They would have these big dining facilities with contractors and professionally prepared meals. We didn't have that in 2003. So it was a very different environment.
Is that because the economics changed in regards to third-party partnerships and corporations getting involved in contracts in the war?
It's a matter of 5 years of development. You know, the war had progressed, and we had 5 years to develop our positions.
Right.
And so we weren't an invasion force anymore. At that point, we were an occupation force.
Right.
And so we had a lot of infrastructure in place at that point, and including contractors. But back in 2003, I didn't have access to email. So I was commissioned on August 28th, didn't even know it. And it wasn't until September 17th that I found out that I was already a commissioned officer in the Navy.
Right.
And I needed to get out of Iraq, back to the United States to accept my commission, swear into the Navy, and start a new career.
Right.
So it took me a while to get out of Iraq. They had to extend the period of time I had to accept my commission. They had to extend that.
Right.
And when I got back to the States, I was trying to process out of the Army. The Army would say out process, but that's not grammar. So I'd say I was out processing from the Army. And I had leave built up. And they made me take my leave as an enlisted soldier, because if they cashed me out at that point,
we lost Andy there, but I don't know what happened there. Sorry.
Andy looked like he popped off for a minute. But anyway, so I swore in to the Navy on November 4th, but my date of rank never changed. So from August 28th until November 4th, 2003, I was the only ensign in the Army.
Very good. And what rank did you leave the Army at?
I was a sergeant.
Sergeant.
Yep.
So you transferred.
Well, technically, you left the Army as an ensign.
That's a good point, Robbie. Yes, technically, I left the Army as an ensign, but the last pay grade that the Army was paying was as sergeant.
Sergeant. Okay.
Yeah.
And you transfer. So did you have to serve? What vessels did you serve on, or did you stay on the ground or stone vessels?
So I worked a lot with SEAL teams. I was because I was an Army Ranger. I knew how to shoot, which is unusual for the Navy. I knew how to shoot and maneuver, ground maneuvers. So I would do intel with the SEAL teams. I'm not a SEAL myself, but I would do intel. I did all the training that the SEALs do except for BUDS. BUDS is the basic underwater demolition school, and that's the school that they make SEALs from. So you famously would see them all tied up and gagged and blindfolded in pools, trying to get themselves free, and eating logs over their heads and stuff like that. All the if you ever see the film G.I. Jane, it's a good.
Yeah.
You can see a lot of SEAL training. I didn't have to do all of that, but all of the other courses that they do, a special driving course, like a James Bond kind of driving course, special weapons courses and so forth. I had to do all of those things. And I was served mostly with the SEALs, but I have served aboard ship. I was aboard ship with the SEALs during the Captain Sullivan situation. I was. I'm sorry.
What was that?
That was Captain Sullivan was a merchant ship.
Captain Phillips.
Sorry.
Is that
Captain
the one
Phillips.
with Tom
Oh, I'm
Hanks?
sorry, Captain Phillips. Yes, Captain Sullivan is somebody else.
So
He
was
is the Miracle on the Hudson.
He's the miracle on the Hudson.
Those by
No, I just saw the film. No, I understand your confusion now.
Both Tom Hanks.
yeah, interesting enough.
I'll use that as well. No, it was Captain Phillips. So he was captured by Somali pirates, and so we had SEAL snipers in place to take out those Somali pirates. So I was providing intelligence. That's how I spent Easter of that year. And then I was also more recent. The last ship I was on was the Mount Whitney, which is a command ship. It's the flagship of the U.S. Sixth Fleet, which is out of Gaeta, Italy. So it's like different ships have different designators. Like a destroyer would be a DD, a frigate an FF, a carrier CVN. So this would be an LCC, and we used to refer to it as a large cabin cruiser. We also called it Building 20 or Building 19. Because its whole number was we were 19. I was also on Blue Ridge, which is the same ship over in Japan. So one of them is LLC 19, the other is LLC 20. I think the Mount Whitney, I believe, is 20. So we used to call it Building 19 because it's often at the pier side, so often that it's just another building. But that's my old ship, yeah. So I was that was my last ship. And I was there off the coast of Libya in 2011 during Operation Odyssey Dawn, which was a very unfortunate name for a military operation against Gaddafi.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that was
during the Obama administration.
That's right. So that was the last time I was afloat. After I came back and I did several Pentagon tours after that.
Right. Do you well, obviously you're in intelligence. You know that the Republic of Ireland has or used to have quite a good link to Libya.
I know you get your oranges from Libya. Israel, yeah.
We got other things from Libya as well. Even back in the 70s, we got our arms from Libya.
Yes, I'm well aware.
The other interesting thing about Libya before Gaddafi came down, because even though there was a lot of bad things and ills that Gaddafi did create in Libya, one of the things he was very progressive with was his education system, and as part payment for kind of the good or bad the allegiance we had with Libya, Libya was the only country in the world besides the Republic of Ireland to use our education system. So there was a stage where in Libya, if you finished school, you would sit the leaving cert when you finished school in Libya, and that's secondary school or high school as the Americans call it. But yeah, that was
to what we have over here, the SAT, not quite, but similar in concept to help determine what kind of education you are eligible for onward, universities and so forth.
Yeah, but the SATs is multiple choice and tick the box. The leaving cert's a little bit.
That's right.
Yes.
But I found it particularly easy. I completed it.
Who's speaking?
Similar in concept to help.
Sorry, that's me. I had another tab open.
Oh, you were talking.
Wondering.
You're talking to yourself.
No, I believe I was actually trying to get the Facebook tab open because, Mihal, it looks like you may have, by proximity, bumped into Kim Mulcahy, one of our crew. So it turns out she was on the Mount Whitney for a visit to Cove. I believe it's Kim It's either Kim or Jerry. I'm not sure which.
Okay.
Is somebody saying that in the comments? Is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Does she know me? Is she saying she knows me?
Oh, which I don't see that. Is that which comments are that? Is that a private chat or something you're talking about?
No, it's in the live comments.
If you can hear me, I was embarked staff with Admiral Harris. So if you were there with Admiral Harris, then we may have bumped into each other.
Oh, it's Terrence. My apologies, Terrence. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. There it is. I see it now. It's popping. It's just popped up there. Yeah, it was Terrence Mulvey was on the Mount Whitney for a visit to Cove. So there you go. That's so. She didn't look like she had too much in the way of
Weapons?
weapons emplacement.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't have it. She has 50 mil. That's it. It's a command ship, so it's kitted out with all sorts of intelligence gathering and communications equipment and so forth. It's really it's when you go inside, it's like the Death Star inside. You know, it's really quite advanced. But there's no weapons aboard.
Right.
There's no major naval weapons.
You've got a helo pad at the
Yes, it has a helo pad. In fact, that's how I got aboard. I was flown.
So we're getting someone's we're getting someone's house movements around the back there.
Sorry, that was me. That was behind me. Or in front of me. Sorry.
Yeah.
And it's very similar as I said. It's always funny because somebody once said to me that the bridge of a Navy command ship is very much like the bridge of a cruise liner, except the bridge of a cruise liner is a bit more comfortable. And Michael, you might recognize this a little bit, although I don't know how many cruise ships you've managed to get onto. Bear with me a sec.
Never been aboard a cruise ship.
Direct feed from the ISS on the screen behind me there. So it's finally back up.
It's back up, is it?
Yeah.
StreamYard is not letting me. Oh, why is Mozilla being Mozilla?
Well, you can only do it.
Mozilla. Does anybody use that anymore?
Yeah, they've
I stopped using that years ago.
What line were you with, Rob?
Zoom and other companies have kind of written their code for Mozilla. I had to download Mozilla onto the Mac recently after not using it for years because it was causing loads of problems when I was doing MakerChat in regards to compatibility and other nonsense. So it's Mozilla used to be the best one out there.
It was brilliant.
It still is
for years.
To answer your question, Mihal, I was with my parent company was Cunard Cruise Lines.
Oh, yeah.
So they own P&O, Princess Cruises, Carnival Cruises, and they own about 5 or 6 different cruises. So that was my gig. I was running anywhere up to the Grand and Diamond class cruise liners was my gig. They're a lot bigger now than they were when I was at sea.
Yeah. We always say that if ever we take a cruise, it would be Cunard. We just don't have the patience for Disney or Carnival.
Well, you got to explain that. That's in joke stuff right there.
Cunard is the company that runs the likes of the Queen Mary 2, the Queen Elizabeth 2. They're the fancy cruise line, don't you know?
They're more elegant. You know, it's more about an experience at sea. Whereas
Disney Cruise Line is basically like a theme park at sea.
Are basically theme parks afloat.
Yeah.
You know, lots of water rides and stuff like that. It's very loud and noisy a ship. You know, we would want to use it as a vacation. I just turned 50 years old, so I'm a lot less fun than I might have been used to be. We sort of look at Cunard and say, well, if we ever do take a cruise, that would be what we would probably go with.
Transatlantic. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, this feed has been going on for 2 hours. I think it's a good time to end it. It's 2134 here. The Dragon module capsule is winging its way to the ISS, which you can log on to NASA and check out the ISS feeds. She'll approach the ISS sometime tomorrow, just over 18 hours time. So that'll be interesting to watch for everybody to see a live feed of that. I found it really interesting this evening to not only witness the launch, but also to have Michael, Lieutenant Commander Michael Quigley, U.S. Navy retired, join us this evening. So I think that was real great amount of information there. It was almost like an interview for you tonight there, Michael. So thanks for
I'm appreciated
Michael.
allowed to participate. I really enjoyed it. You guys do a great job, and I'm proud to be part of the USS Cuchulain with you.
Well, we're delighted to have you. So without further ado, I've been John.
I've been Robbie.
I've been Michael.
I've been Ann. And I've been Andy.
I thought you would say you were Anne. I was like, Anne's in Q forward.
I'll probably jump in there now.
You're stuck it out for 2 hours with us. But Barry and just joining us there tonight. You can rewind back and this we'll put this in the announcements. You'll be able to watch this later on. So thanks everybody. Thanks for everybody who joined us in the comments, and we will see you all again. Take care. Good night. Bye bye.